The space race, a race between the Soviet Union and the United States of America during the Cold War, whose sole purpose was to prove who had superior spaceflight capabilities. The aftermath of the space race has had a lasting impact on the U.S. and all mankind. As innovation and invention spurred to life, there is one invention that can be credited with starting the space race: Sputnik 1. Man has marveled at space for ages, and although humans have been trying to get out into space, the USSR were the first to achieve successful progress.
Sputnik 1 was launched on October 4th, 1957, at exactly 7:28 in the afternoon. It was humanity's first ever artificial satellite. People were marveled by it. A large sum of people worked on this project, but a notable person that worked on it was Sergei Korolev, the lead engineer and designer of Sputnik 1. He is credited with being the man responsible for the first human spaceflight. Korolev was an incredible engineer who was infatuated with aerospace engineering. He designed his own glider at the age of 17 and eventually invented the first Soviet flying rocket-powered glider. He was definitely a large reason as to why Sputnik 1 was so successful. To build Sputnik 1, Korolev and his team needed to have a clear understanding of the laws of physics related to gravity, motion, and orbital mechanics. They also used complex mathematical calculations to determine exact trajectory, velocity, and parameters for the aircraft. Recent advancements in material science, electronics, and radio, as well as many others, also played a major role.
The launching of Sputnik was a momentous and joyous occasion for the USSR. People celebrated and cheered on Sputnik. The US, however, did not feel the same way.
The media's response to the launch of Sputnik was what you would expect, especially during this time period. The US saw Sputnik's launch as a threat. Media outlets were creating hysteria by exaggerating the danger of Sputnik, fearing that Russia would develop some sort of space-launched missile that the US would have no defense against.
Well, sir, what do you think about this achievement of the Russians?
I think it's a remarkable thing. My only regret is that we couldn't get there first.
What do you think this is going to be due to our prestige?
I don't think it's going to enhance it any at this time, but I imagine we'll be able to catch up and maybe even pass them on the way.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
It's frightening. We should find out what they're doing that we're not doing, and we should do something about it very quickly.
What is your feeling about this Soviet accomplishment?
Well, as usual, they're ahead of us, a little step ahead. But that doesn't mean much, actually. It means that they took a risk that we didn't dare take, probably, because it's too dangerous for a man.
You're not particularly worried about their getting there first?
You know, the world has always been on the edge of catastrophe since it exists. I don't think it's much worse now than it has ever been. If you read the history, you see every generation has a terror of being destroyed completely or something like that. I mean, nowadays it's exactly the same with a little more, I say, a little more actual danger because the scale is much larger.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Sputnik was the starting point of the space race, a 20-year race to prove who had the superior technology between the US and the USSR.
18-orbit flight next attempt. There are other U.S. space achievements. Saturn, the moon rocket, is successfully tested with 1.5 times the thrust that pushed the Soviet Vostoks into orbit. August 27th, Mariner 2 starts its great exploratory voyage. 4 months to the planet Venus. Delicate instructions change Mariner's course in space, and the marvelous messenger keeps reporting across the void about the path man soon must follow.
Arthur C. Clarke, a famous science fiction author, proclaimed that with this Russian satellite in space, the US had officially fallen behind as a second-rate power, sparking even more hysteria throughout the general public. The government scattered to find a solution to this perceived issue.
Fear spread throughout the U.S., and with this fear came politicians promising to fix this issue. As people promised to win the space race, an old president was rushed out, and in came a new man who had a plan on winning the race.
Now, although Eisenhower created NASA, President John F. Kennedy was the one who really boosted science in the U.S. On May 25, 1961, Kennedy stood before Congress asking for an additional $7 to $9 billion to be added to the space program. This is where JFK's plan to put a man on the moon really began.
If this capsule history of our progress teaches us anything, it is that man in his quest for knowledge and progress is determined and cannot be deterred.
JFK was incredibly charismatic and got the majority of the U.S. to support the crazy goal of putting a man on the moon. Although it might have seemed impossible, JFK was motivated and inspired by the thought of getting a win over the USSR. Over the next 8 years, engineers at NASA were hard at work trying to fulfill the president's wish. 3 separate NASA programs, Mercury, Gemini, and Apollo, were erected to accomplish this massive feat.
After years of development, years of testing, and a 3 full-day journey for the astronauts aboard, the first human ever set foot on the moon.
And none of this would have ever come to fruition if it weren't for the satellite launch by Russia. Many engineering minds collaborated and communicated with the other engineers to accomplish this monumental feat of getting the first man-made satellite into space.
Although the satellite itself didn't do much, the impact it had on the technological advancement of the world will always be remembered and will forever keep its name in the spotlight.